or in case you didn't take a moment to look at it. And so, yeah, I asked you guys, have you been in Taiwan before? And 9 of you said, yes, you have, which is great. Welcome back. And 25 of you said, no, you have not. So welcome. We're very excited to have you here. I also asked about your teaching experience, and I was very, very excited to see that 28 of you, a majority, said that you do have teaching experience. That'll be a really great and a useful tool for you to use to build off of once you get here and you start working in the classroom. 0 of you said you had no teaching experience, which made me very happy. And 6 of you said kind of, so maybe something like tutoring or other things like that. Any experience is good experience. Everything can be used as a foundation for you to grow as a teacher. So that's great to hear that a lot of you guys have taught before. I also asked about your Chinese, and some of you, 5, a small group, said that yes, your Chinese heritage language or advanced. 11 said yes-ish, maybe intermediate or beginner, and 19 of you said nope, no Chinese at all. If you're one of the people who said no Chinese at all, no worries. English is definitely a language you can use to get around in Taiwan, but I'm sure by the end of the year, you'll be able to pick up a few phrases and learn a little bit. And then we also asked you guys during the small group discussions to talk about some questions or concerns that you had about maybe teaching in Taiwan or living in Taiwan. And we took a moment to jot down some of the most common questions that came up. So I just wanted to run through some of those questions that you guys had from yesterday. One of the questions was, what's the difference between CLIL versus non-CLIL? This is definitely something we're going to talk about this semester because a lot of you guys might end up teaching CLIL, especially in New Taipei and Taipei. So this will definitely be something that we'll address later. You guys also asked a very, very important question about what language should I be using in the classroom, whether it's classroom English or maybe using Chinese. This is definitely a very big and very important and almost slightly controversial question, depending on who you ask, because language in the classroom is definitely something that depends on your specific situation and context, and it will definitely be something that we address in a lot of the workshops in the beginning of this semester. You guys also talked about what your role is as ETAs in the classroom. That's something that I hope that you'll kind of slowly learn and figure out once you get into your classroom and meet your students and your co-teachers. Another really great question was, what do I do if my school is new to the program? Well, this is going to be something that is a learning experience for all of us together, because if your school is new, you'll be their first ETA, and you'll kind of be the start to give them an idea of what having an ETA might be like and what they might be able to do with an ETA to better help their English program at their school. So these are all great questions, and we're not going to go over the answers to them right now in today's workshop, but I just wanted to let you guys know that we hear your questions and we'll definitely work on addressing all of them in the upcoming workshops that we have next week, or maybe in the workshops that you'll have once you arrive in Taiwan and start the official semester workshops. But one question that you did ask, many of you asked, was what should I bring to Taiwan? And this is definitely something that we can answer now. A lot of you guys asked it, actually all 3 groups asked about what kind of things you might want to pack. So what we did is we actually put together a small list of things that you might want to pack or not pack for Taiwan. And I put it into an editable Google document for those of you who have been in Taiwan before. And so I just kind of jotted down a lot of the stuff that I mentioned to some of the groups yesterday. And I mentioned like what kind of item it might be, whether or not it's available in Taiwan, but then like a note about what might be hard to find. Also some things that David mentioned. So David mentioned, and here, why don't I go ahead and I'll share this with you guys right now so that you can take a look at it. Here is the link. Oh, wait. Oh, David already sent it. Thanks, David. But yeah, so you guys can go ahead and take a look at this. This is just from us advisors, just a few things of chatting around. This is by no means a whole comprehensive list, but I just wanted to jot down some of the stuff that we talked about yesterday that you could reference when you're getting ready to come to Taiwan and packing. The bottom 3 here, cultural items, maybe things to make you feel at home. These are some of the things that David talked about in his small group discussion that you might want to bring to share with your students. as opposed to something like teaching materials, which you might be able to find easily in Taiwan. And the only one that I wanted to point out that I didn't talk about yesterday, which is just 100% optional, but just something that you might think about, is might be a small present or treat from your hometown. So in Taiwan, it's really common to buy small presents, usually food or snacks, whenever you travel and bring them back to your office to share with your coworkers. It's a really friendly gesture, and it's a great way to get to know the other people in the office and to start a conversation. So you don't have to do this by any means, but if you are thinking about how you might want to introduce yourself to the other teachers at your office in your new school, you might consider bringing something small that you could pass out on your first day. So for example, for myself, I brought some small individually wrapped maple candies, like maple syrup candies from Maine, and I passed them out to the other teachers in my office on the first day. This is 100% optional. Of course, you don't have to do any of these things. I just wanted to give it as a suggestion in case you're thinking about that right now. Also, just to point out the top bed sheets, someone asked about bedding yesterday. This is one piece of bedding that you might not be able to find or have a harder time finding in Taiwan, so you can check that out. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. And yeah, like I kind of mentioned briefly, it is an editable document. So for the 9 of you who have been in Taiwan before, if there's anything else you want to add or any comments or questions you have, feel free to just add it to the document. That can be something that we can just build upon. And I'll also share it with the other advisors in other regions too to see if they have any ideas. Okay, so that being said, the schedule for today is very similar to yesterday. For the first hour, we'll have 3 kind of mini lessons about what is a lesson plan, how do you lesson plan, and then also some examples of real lesson plans used in Taiwanese classrooms to give you guys some examples of what a Taiwanese lesson plan might look like. Then we'll have a short break. And then during the second hour, we're actually going to do an activity instead of small group discussion. So Sia will introduce the activity, and then we'll do small group work for the activity. And then the wrap up will be sharing the activity with the bigger group. So that's what we're going to do today. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the first part, what is a lesson plan? But I just want to let you guys know today is a little bit more relaxed because we don't have as tight of a schedule, not as many things to try and do in the second hour. So if you have any questions throughout these 3 lectures, feel free to just put them in the chat box and we can answer them kind of as we go. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. What is a lesson plan? And for all of you who have teaching experience, this might be a little bit of a review, but you can just take a look at kind of what I've prepared and what specific lesson plan template you'll be using for the Fulbright program, which might be different than what you've used before. Okay, so what is a lesson plan? For those who have never lesson planned before, a lesson plan is basically a teacher's game plan for what will happen during the lesson, basically from the beginning of class until the end of class, usually timed by the school bell. So when that first bell rings, what's happening, and all the way until the end of class bell rings, what's happening. And a very important question that comes after that is, why do we lesson plan? What is the purpose of having this plan in place before we go into the classroom? Well, the answer to this is pretty obvious, pretty straightforward. It helps keep order in the classroom. It helps make sure that you're following a set path and that you're able to make sure that the objectives that you have for that specific day are met. What goals do you want students to be able to learn, and how can I make sure that they're met by the end of the lesson? Also, lesson planning can be a great way to help you stay on track in the long run. So for example, if you know, okay, I have 6 classes before they have their unit test, having some kind of lesson plan or idea of what will be happening in each of those 6 classes can help make sure that you're preparing students for everything that will be on the test 6 classes later. So lesson planning can help you stay on track not only in the short term, in that immediate class, but also in the long run for the unit or maybe the semester. But probably the most important reason and most applicable to you guys as ETAs is the fact that lesson planning can help make sure that both teachers, ETA and LET, because you're co-teaching, have an understanding of what is happening in the classroom and what is expected of them. Because oftentimes when we jump into a classroom setting with two teachers, sometimes it's easy for the teacher who's doing the lead teaching at one part to just kind of do their thing, and the other teacher might feel like they don't really know what's going on or what's their role during that period of time where they're not lead teaching. So having a lesson plan in place can help set clear expectations for what both teachers should be doing during the entire class and what the students should be doing and what's expected of everyone. So that being said, what exactly does a lesson plan look like? Well, if you Google search images for lesson plans, you'll find 39 million results and a lot of different pictures and a lot of different templates. There's a lot of different options. But don't be too overwhelmed by all the different options of lesson plans because they all have the very same components at their core. They're just designed differently. And that being said, I figured that we could just focus on the format that you'll be using specifically instead of looking at a lot of different formats. So I want to run through with you guys Fulbright's specific lesson plan template that they have that you'll be using for any kind of lesson plans that you're asked to submit this semester. I believe you will probably submit a lesson plan in your first week of classes at your school, and then later when we do observations, so when the TEFL advisors and coordinators come to observe your classes, you'll be asked to submit a lesson plan in advance or on the day of to let us know what's happening so we can follow and see what's going on in the class. So this is a template you'll become very familiar with, and if you don't have it yet, we'll be sure to share it with you afterwards. So basically, what goes on this template? Well, it's very straightforward. The topic about what's going on in that class, the date of the class, the time of the class, the book that you're using. The book that you're using is put there just as a great reference in case you go back to that lesson plan later. You're able to find that specific lesson if you write down the title of the book. What grade you're teaching and the teachers. So for the teachers part, you'd be putting your name and your LET's name. And then you also might put the classroom setting or special situation or circumstance that's going on, just to give us a little bit of a better understanding of the context. This is especially helpful for observers like advisors or coordinators who are going to look and observe your lesson because it lets us better understand what's going on in the classroom. So maybe for classroom setting, maybe it's that class's homeroom and you've traveled to their classroom to teach the class. Maybe you have an English classroom at your school and they came to your classroom. Just these little points that you might give us to give us a better picture of what's happening. The next thing that you'll see is learning objectives, which are your goals. For those of you, you may or may not have seen this acronym before, SWABAT. It stands for Students Will Be Able To. It's a common acronym to use in order to take up less space when you're writing learning goals or objectives. And you'll write some goals about what you hope to achieve in that lesson. Now, in the next part, Sia is going to talk a little bit more about what are realistic goals and how you might come up with goals. So I'll kind of skip over that for now. But on the first part of your lesson plan, you'll write some objectives. Then you'll want to list the materials that you'll need for the entire lesson. This is just a great thing to put down because it can help you remember what things you might need to prepare or bring to the classroom so you don't forget anything. It can also, again, help us follow along if we're there for an observation. And then the last thing you write at the top part of that lesson plan is the basic vocabulary or sentence patterns that you're planning on teaching or addressing in that specific class. So this is your target language that you're trying to work on or review or introduce. So after that, the middle part is kind of the bulk of it. It's kind of everything that's going to be happening from the minute the bell rings until the minute that the end of class bell rings. And so the first thing you'll see is a warm-up period. So when the students first come into the classroom, you want to make sure that they're feeling relaxed and kind of get them into the mindset that we're in English class. So instead of just jumping right into the textbook, it's nice to warm them up and to get them kind of focused on the English classroom mindset. So an example of that might be the ETA plays a good morning song on YouTube and the LET walks around and makes sure students are seated. And you would jot down roughly how many minutes this would take and what materials or tools you would need. And yeah, this is basically kind of a way to get everyone in the right mindset for the class. And then after that, a common first thing to do is and here just as a note, some common acronyms that people use for students is SS, and then T for teacher, or ETA or LET if that's easier. So you don't always have to write it all the way out. And also, just as I mentioned kind of before, making sure you're writing down when you're writing these lesson plans what each teacher is doing. So who is doing what, not just writing what maybe the person teaching is doing, but also what the supporting teacher is doing as well, to make sure that it's very clear about the expectations for all the teachers in the classroom. Next, you'll have the introduction or the presentation part, where you'll probably do some kind of teacher-fronted kind of introduction to what you want to talk. This is the teaching part. Usually in a lot of classroom settings in Taiwan, maybe the LET will teach it in Chinese or might take the lead over the teaching part in the beginning, which is usually followed by some kind of activity for practice. So it's taught and then it's practiced in a controlled activity. And then after that, it's produced by students. So for example, the LET might teach the sentence pattern on the board using the textbook. And then the LET might draw students' names, and then the ETA will ask the students a chosen sentence from the grammar as kind of like a controlled practice. And then for the production, where students get to use the language on their own, maybe the ETA will lead the students in playing a name game using a ball and kind of working that sentence pattern that you're looking at. And always writing what the other supporting teacher is doing as well. And then after that, you usually do some kind of closure. This time is oftentimes used by LETs to remind students of maybe their homework and their workbook or a quiz coming up or other kind of things that they might need to make sure that the students know and remember before the end of class. But there's also a part at the very bottom for you to think about some additional things you might do if you have extra time, or some adaptations you might do if something goes wrong. So this is kind of a little bit of place you might have a little foresight about predicting what might happen in the class. So for example, you could have an optional exit ticket if you have extra time at the end of class. It's things you might ask the students to do before they can leave to assure that they've met the goal and understand the sentence pattern. Or maybe an optional adaptation of the game. If maybe throwing the ball is too exciting for third grade, maybe you have an adaptation of that game where they're sitting down. And for those of you who have some kind of background in education, you might recognize this structure, presentation, practice, produce, as the PPP teaching model. So this is actually a very common and very popular teaching model in EFL context, because it allows the teacher to present a new material, and then it allows the students to practice it in controlled activities. So kind of what we can see right here, the presentation part is where the teacher presents the content, usually on the board. Usually during this part, the students are listening, so it's more teacher-fronted. And then during the practice part, it's more of a controlled practice, perhaps with a very controlled activity or a worksheet. And then the produce part is supposed to be a little bit more free, where students produce the language more freely in some kind of game or maybe activity. And this is something that's very common, and this is kind of the main takeaway I want you guys to take home today, because this is something that you'll probably, or I encourage you to use when you first start thinking about lesson planning in Taiwan, because this is a model of teaching that's very common, very commonly used. So you might use this in the future. Now, some of you might have also heard about a very similar model called ESA teaching model, which is Engage, Study, Activate. This is very similar to the PPP model. The only difference is Engage, the first one, is a little bit less teacher-fronted, because it's an introduction to the materials, but kind of in a student discovery way. So you kind of work with the students, and it's a little bit more student-fronted on the introduction. And then study would be similar to practice, and activate would be similar to produce or production. So some of you may have heard about this before. Both are equally good. They're very similar to one another. It just kind of depends on your context. So yeah, this was kind of a very brief kind of introduction to what you might see in a lesson plan, but just kind of remember this PPP model for now, and think about how you might utilize that model when you're writing lesson plans in the future. And then the very last thing is at the very bottom of the Fulbright lesson plan template, you'll see a reflection part, which is to be written after you've completed the lesson. And it's a place for you to write what went well, what didn't go well, and what you might change. And it's really important to take the time after a lesson to jot down some of these notes because it can help you give you a little bit of insight about what you might want to do differently in the future, and it can help us grow and become better teachers. So for example, don't let them throw the ball too far. It can get very out of hand very fast, and that's definitely true if you try and do any kind of like ball games in the classroom. So yeah, that's actually all I have for my part. So I'm going to turn it over to Sia. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you, Deja, and good evening, everyone. And I'm going to share my screen now. Give me a minute. Okay, let me present this. Oh, wait, sorry, I need to redo this again. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It's okay. Let me start this. Okay, let me try this again. I'm sorry for the technical issue. Okay, it's not working. Okay, let me try this again. All right. Okay. Can everybody hear? I think everybody can hear me okay, right? Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so sorry, this is not it. Let me go back to where I was. I don't know why it's here. Okay, so my session is going to talk about how to do lesson plan. And for some of you, you may already had experience, or you had a general understanding of how do you do this process. But now, as an ETA, when you're working in the schools in Taiwan, you alternatively you have to work with your local your co-teachers, your LETs. So this is just a guideline. Sorry, not a guideline, but it's like a reference for you to know, like there are different types of co-teaching strategy, co-teaching models. This we're not going to get into that too deep today, but for example, depends on your collaboration levels with your co-teachers in different time or different kinds of lessons. Then there are different strategies that you can utilize with your co-teachers. But all these strategy involves with you and your co-teacher has to co-plan. So now, but how do you co-plan? So right now, because you guys are all still in the state, you haven't met your teachers yet, met your co-teachers yet, you haven't met your students yet. So it's kind of hard to navigate or understand what your new schools is going to look like. But for the first and the most, we will suggest you to try to get to know your co-teacher or co-teachers and understand what's the expectation of you being there, or your responsibilities. And just like we talked about it yesterday, different school has different kind of way to run their this program. Maybe it's their first time to join this, so they have no idea, so they're also testing the water. So this is something that you will need to figure out when you are on the site. But of course, when you are in a new school, and the school is also new to this program, it's hard for you to navigate. But of course, don't worry, we're going to be there to help you, and we will run workshops to help you throughout the way, and also the local teacher will have some training too. Then when you are trying to find a way to understanding the expectation of you being there and try to co-plan, also think about trying to build a relationship with your co-teacher, like something that they just suggested earlier, that's trying to get to know everybody in the office, that definitely help. And try to find an efficient way to communicate with your co-teacher, especially when you are going to co-plan with your teacher. The reason is that, like I shared yesterday, standardized tests is still the culprit of many pressure that being landed on teachers' plate. So a lot of times they actually don't have enough time to do it all, but they are expected to do it all. And luckily, with your help, maybe they can also utilize your specialties to help them to take some of the weight out from them. But when you're trying to do the co-plan, make sure to be able to present. So for example, maybe your co-teacher expects you to do some activity with, let's say, this set of grammar. Don't when you're trying to go co-play with your teacher, maybe go over and then have some plan ready, and then just quickly go over that with the teacher, maybe in 10 minutes. So that way you can throughout the time you can navigate. Oh, maybe during this time of the week, this teacher has a 10-minute break, 30 minutes break, and then you can go over that with them. Try to build that into their availabilities. So that will definitely help the relationship, of course, but also help you to understand what's going on in the classrooms. And learn from your teacher, try to be creative, and the teacher is, I believe, most of them are all willing to help you to understand, but just learn as much as you can when you were there. Now, yesterday I talked about setting realistic goals, and that is a general guideline for you overall this year when you're working in schools, and also when you are planning lesson 2. And this is another acronym, it's called SMART goal, which is being used in many industries. But here specifically, I will be just talking about lesson planning. When you are setting goal, in the future, we might get into a little bit deeper in that. But overall, the general guideline is these five keywords. So for the first one, it's being specific. So like Deja was going through the lesson objectives that you have to set. Try to be specific and be exact. Because when you set the goal that is too broad, like saying, I gave you some one example here, saying student can read simple sentences. So there are many simple sentences, but the word complexity is very different. So what you should try to word it is more specific. Like student can read sentences with different animal names. So make it small and make it precise. It's very important. It's going to help you in a long way. Because that connect to the next one. How are you able to assess students' achievement, informally or formally? For example, if you make the sentence say student can read simple sentences, that is really hard to assess the students. If Michael can read this, but maybe Cindy can, and Cindy know more vocabulary to substitute that, then that will become a little bit different. Like how can you assess these two students' achievement? So for example, this is like one of the results. Mike was able to read, to tell 5 different color words in English from knowing none of them in the beginning. So it has to be measurable when you are doing the assessment. Now, then let's talk about, so I put achievable and realistic together because that is something that a lot of teachers, a lot of us are dealing with on a daily basis when we're trying to plan lesson, when we're trying to plan activity. Make sure you just make it small and specific enough. And I call it by size because it's literally just a small chunk. And when you later we will take a look at the textbook examples. You will have more a clear picture of what I'm talking about. When you dump it all on students, or even when you just look at the lesson, look at the material you're going to have or you have to teach, a lot of time you will find it overwhelming. Now imagine you are an adult, so you already know that it's going to be overwhelming for you to learn it. So imagine that for a younger learner. So whenever you are setting the goal, make sure it's just small enough for students to be able to obtain the knowledge on a daily basis. Then the other one is always build on top of what they already know and just add a little bit more challenge. So for example, like this one, student will be able to use learn color word. So the learn color word is their base. They already learned it. Then now they have to describe their favorite animals or things and try to use those words. So for example, they already know their favorite animal is zebra or zebra, somebody calls it zebra. They know the color black and white. Then you can add on top of that, teach them. So it's, oh, yes, the zebra has, a zebra has black and white striped patterns, striped colors. So you can teach them about just a little bit more about the words they already know. So these are something that is very important when you're trying to co-plan with your teacher. Now, the very last thing, but it's the things that crush probably all of us the most, is the time. Sometimes we just being too ambitious, and we didn't remind ourselves that time is never enough. So just make sure you keep time in mind, and also keep the student learning needs in mind, because sometimes when you go lengthy, that's my next slide. Okay, when a lesson go way too lengthy, especially for the younger learner, they are gone just like that. So for example, like this part, I only right here, right this part, is the main body of the, oh, oopsie, sorry. So it's the main body of the lesson. So for the warm-up introduction, it's mostly like warm-up, just like getting into the mood. So it's probably 1 or 2 minutes, and then introduction, let them know what they are learning today, and then maybe teacher modeling that takes up 7-8 minutes. But the most important part is make sure you plan a lot of engagement time for student or interaction time for student to practice the skill that you're trying to teach them or you're trying to help them practice. And later on, when you're doing the assessment, either formally or informally, then that's the chunk of time you can understand if students understand what you are teaching or not. And the quick check-in, check-out, you can just put it in the assessment time. That's the time that can just do it like that, probably 5 minutes. And yeah, so time management is very important. And usually we call them like 5 or 10 minutes blocks. The last one, be flexible and adapt to the new situation. I believe, if not all, many of you probably had the experience of I planned for doing this or teach this. I didn't finish it, or it just totally crashed. My student is not responding, or any sort of scenario, or you had a bad day, you just don't feel well, and then you crash the lesson. That's perfectly normal. And general suggestion or just recommendation, always have a plan B. Sometimes it requires you to do a little bit of improv, but that's something that you have to expect that will happen sometimes. And if you go over time, you don't have enough time to finish the lesson, and that's totally okay too, because you can just pick up where you are and continue for the next lesson, and that is totally fine, because sometimes the unit goes way longer than you expect. Later we will take a look at our textbook examples, so you will understand more what I'm talking about. So now the most important part is that keep students and their learning need in mind, because whatever you are doing, whatever we're doing, co-teaching, co-planning lessons, assessing students, or trying to plan learning engagement and everything, it's all because students. So with this said, Later, we will take a look of examples and see what is the actual, like in action or already happened in the past, the lesson plan looks like. Now I am going to hand it over to David and Deja. So let me stop screen. David, Deja.
All right. Welcome everybody. For the next section, we're going to take a look at some lesson plans, some examples before we take a quick break. And these are not perfect examples, but they're real examples that were used recently in classrooms in Taiwan. I chose 3 examples representing sort of different demographics. The first one is a CLIL lesson for first grade. The second one is a 3rd grade lesson that was used in camp. And then the third is a 7th grade English class example, which is actually Deja's that she wrote. And so we'll kind of look through them to give you an idea of what lesson plans might look like and to get a better idea of the types of things that you might be teaching yourself when the time comes. So let's look at the first one, first grade life science, which if you are teaching elementary CLIL, you might be teaching. And so I'll share this. Maybe make it bigger. All right, so first grade life science. So this is a class, life science is a class that is commonly taught in a CLIL context because it is a non-tested class. It's sort of one of the areas that they're expanding English teachers into are classes that don't require like major testing like math, science, Chinese, English, like the big core subjects, well, I guess a non-core subject. And so with first graders, officially English classes don't start until 3rd grade. And so by moving foreign English teachers into, or ETAs in this case, into first grade classes, some kids have been learning English since preschool, but you can't expect anybody to have a background. So, but this is actually a lesson that I observed a couple of times because it's just in the life science textbook. But the topic is sounds. And this is a first grade lesson for CLIL. And so what they identified as learning objectives, students will be able to identify sounds. So recognizing a sound, hearing a sound and knowing what it is. And especially because this is very beginner first grade, being able to identify the name of a sound in English is not likely. Hopefully they'll be able to do so in Chinese. And so they wrote Chinese with English encouragement. Second, students will be able to say a sound makes them feel good or bad. And so that would be an English goal, that students will be able to say good or bad regarding the sound that they heard. And lastly, students will be able to explain why a sound makes them feel good or bad. And the expectation is that that would be done in Chinese. So especially in a CLIL context, in a CLIL context in general, you're less likely to see or be able to expect English only because there's more of a content heavy focus and the content is more likely to be above the English levels of the students. So you're more likely to see a mix and you're more likely to take an approach of, let's see how much English we can use. But using a lot of Chinese isn't a problem, especially because you want to make sure that the content is clear. Materials, PowerPoint worksheet for each student. And they also, in this lesson specifically, they used, I think they used a CD player and a computer projector. Basic vocabulary, and I don't think that you need to write all this out yourself, but classroom language, this is something that they worked on as their warm-up in every class. Good morning, hello, hands up, sit down, listen carefully, good job, stuff like that. I don't think you necessarily need to put that as your vocabulary, but you can if it helps. Noisemaker names, so ambulance, piano, yelling, car horn, birds. Those are things that were presented in Chinese, but also introducing the students to the English names as well. The question is the sound good or bad, and the words good and bad. So those are kind of the things that they were focused on in terms of language and content. And so what they did in this lesson, it was super cute, and I liked it quite a bit, especially because first graders, again, attention spans low, and English abilities even lower. So they had a warm up. Hi, hello, good morning, teacher. They had a chant about hands back, look here, listen carefully, which was really helpful. I'm very interested in warm-ups and morning routines. And so that's something that we'll talk a lot about this first semester, is things that you can do to kind of get students in English mode in most cases, how to start classes, and having chants or warm-ups, talking about the weather, how people are doing, what day is today, stuff like that can be very helpful. And so they went over class language, and they had this sort of starting class chant about, behavior and how they should be sitting. So for the introduction to the lesson, is the sound good or bad? They played some sounds. And so again, this was, an ambulance or a piece of music or some birds chirping or some construction noise, and talked about, how do you feel? Students listened to 2 videos without seeing them, decide, is the sound good? Is the sound bad? Describe it. And so initially, a lot of the conversation was in Chinese, making sure they're understanding the concept. How do you feel? Seeing kids' reactions, if they put their hands over their ears or whatever. And then introduced the English vocabulary of good or down, or good or bad, and then associate TPR and gestures for thumbs up for good, thumbs down for bad. And so then, as they played the sounds again, then they helped make have the students make the association with, hear a sound, thumbs up if you think that's a nice sound, thumbs down if you think that is a bad sound. Also adding the question, is the sound good? Is the sound bad? What makes asking the questions, what good and bad sounds have you heard and where? Again, these were asked and answered in Chinese, given the context, but having that discussion, because that's basically in this case, it's a traditionally Chinese class that they're now incorporating English into. For the activity, make a sound game. So they practiced this first part. They were introduced to the sounds. What sound is that? Is it a good or a bad sound? And why? For the second activity, or for the activity, they had a make the sound game, and a student would come up, and I think they had like little cards of, for example, an ambulance, and they would show the kid, like a taboo game, they would show the kid secretly what that object was. And then the kid would say to the rest of the class, like, ooh wee, like an ambulance sound. And then the kids would have to guess the sound and then also say if it was a good or a bad sound. So they could say ambulance in Chinese, but they should say, is it good or bad, with thumbs up or thumbs down in English. And the teacher would ask in English, is it a good sound or is it a bad sound? And they would say good sound, or they would say bad sound. And then as an assessment, they had a worksheet, and it was the same vocabulary of the sounds that they've been listening to, like a bird or music notes or an ambulance. And then they would write a smiley face or a frowny face next to the picture to describe it as good or bad. And then for the closure, and it doesn't say this here, but they had a like an exit song that they did, like another chant that they did, that was kind of a cool down song that they play every class, to kind of get them out of the, like we're winding down and getting ready to go. But it was a very cute class, and I chose this example because this is an example that is heavily Chinese, because it's first grade, and they want to make sure that the content goals of the class are students can recognize sounds, identify them as good or bad, and explain why something is good or bad. And then adding the English objective on top of that, can they recognize the question, is it good, is it a good sound, is it a bad sound, and can they respond in English, good sound or bad sound? So if you are teaching low-level CLIL, you might end up in contexts that look kind of like this. Let's look at another example. And if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat. But we'll look at a third grade example next. And this example is from a camp. And this was also a super cute lesson that I think is also something that you might commonly find yourself doing. It was a camp lesson. I think that it could easily have been done in English class, given the curriculum, or in a science class if you're working on learning sea creatures or animals, sea animals. But if any of you are familiar with Pete the Cat, it's pretty popular here, a series of books about a cat who goes on adventures. And what they were working on, there was a storybook component, and there was an art component. And so those are two things that I encourage. And you also might see often is art integration, where you do an activity and then you do some kind of craft related to that activity, especially for culture lessons, or for example, Thanksgiving or Christmas or holidays. And then storybook integration in order to expose students to more English in the class, and doing that through storytelling. And so the focus was on the craft of making a scuba mask, saying names of sea creatures, and answering questions through Pete the Cat, especially in elementary, although junior high works as well. Repetitive texts are really, really helpful. And that's where every page, there's maybe new content, but that follows a similar pattern that students can, guess how the pattern works, because it repeats throughout. So some vocabulary that the ETA wanted to focus on: scuba mask, glue, cut, art, vocabulary in this case, and then questions like, what does Pete see? Blank, whatever the animal is. It's a seahorse. Is it a seahorse? No. Where is the seahorse? So introduction, introducing an attention getter. And so we'll talk more about attention getters later, but it can be very helpful if you end up teaching in a style where you kind of release students to do something and then need to call them back for attention, having a signal that can get them back in attention. You know, some teachers flash the lights, some teachers have a bell. In this case, the attention getter, because we're taught kind of a water focus, was she'd say waterfall, waterfall, and the students would say shh, which is the waterfall sound, but also be quiet sound. Introduction, and so she introduced scuba diving in general, which is something that is an option. Taiwan is an island, and there are lots of places for scuba diving. This was a lesson that was given in Penghu, and there's a lot of scuba diving in Penghu. So introducing scuba diving, asking students about any experience that they might have scuba diving, again, done in Chinese. Introduce mention of key animals that were going to be in the story and associating TPR actions for those animals. And I don't even remember how she did that. But if you can have an action or a gesture that represents an animal, that can be very helpful. And then you use that gesture when you're reading the story. So the next, she read Pete the Cat, and it was done through scans of the book that were presented as a PowerPoint so that it could be big up on the projection screen. And actually, this part wasn't done. I'll delete that. Okay, so introducing the sentence frame, I see a something. Basically what she did, it's a repetitive text. And so she read through the story, and the story was the story level was much higher than the student's ability. But given the way that she presented it and the visuals and gestures, the students really understood it. They were excited to read it. The story, the visuals were super cute. And so basically, it's about Pete the cat trying to find the seahorse, but every time he goes looking for the seahorse, he finds another animal. And then, then she would use the phrase, what does Pete see? And they would say, whatever the animal that they just saw. Is it a seahorse? No. Where is the seahorse? Because the seahorse is hiding in the picture somewhere every time. And then she'd say, where is the seahorse? And kids would raise their hand, and then she'd choose one kid to come up to the board and point to where the seahorse was. And it was super, super cute. And the kids liked it a lot. And then after that, they did a scuba mask activity where the kids used paper cutouts, and they cut out the goggles and a snorkel thing. And then they used that to for a second reading. And the lesson that I observed, we ended up not having time for the second reading, but put on the mask and snorkel, and then, go scuba diving underwater, and then try to find those animals we learned in the first reading. And so it was a super, super cute example. And I think this is an example of art integration and storybook integration. And so that is nice. For the next one, if we have time, is Deja's, and I'm going to hand it off to her. She's going to talk about her seventh grade English lesson that she did in her own class.
Okay, I'll do this like super, super quickly because we're really low on time. So I'll just kind of run through it really quickly for those of you who are in a junior high school who want to see what kind of junior high school lesson plan might look like. Similar thing in the beginning, I taught a lesson topic, Where's Kitty? That's from the textbook. That's the textbook lesson for grade 7. It was 01. And this lesson was not introducing new material, but it was actually towards the end of the unit. So the entire class was a review game to prepare them for the unit quiz or the unit test that was coming up the following week. So our objectives were students would be able to call on pre-existing knowledge in a very quick manner because it was a game, would be able to orally produce sentences with the assistance of scaffolding on the PPT, Students would be able to comprehend the dialogues and passages and answer comprehension questions, and then produce their own sentences using the vocabulary words provided. So these are the vocabulary from the textbook for that unit. So for those of you who are curious what kind of junior high school vocabulary might look like, those are things like behind, bedroom, maybe, sofa, meow, because it was about a cat, Germany, woman, everything. And then the sentence patterns were, where is blank? It is on, under, behind, or in front of blank. Where are blank? They are in blank. And so what we did, because like I said, this entire lesson was for a review game. So it was designed specifically to take the entire lesson and to build in levels of difficulty. So we started with a very quick warm-up, which at this level, we didn't really do too much. It was more just asking students to get to their seats and be quiet and get ready to listen. Normally we do more of a warm-up, but because the game was going to last the whole class, we didn't have a lot of time for a warm-up in this case. Then the presentation game using the PowerPoint. We divided students into teams. We had students pick their character they wanted for their team. And then we went through the 4 levels of the game, and we told students how they would get points. And in the end, the students' winning team would get sticky notes, which was part of a semester-long reward system that I have. It's kind of like tokens or lottery tickets. So this was a very big motivator for them, was to get sticky notes, because it might meant that they could win a chance to go cooking with me at the end of each month. And then the LET and myself were responsible for each for one of the teams, because the class was split into 2 teams. So this is a way that we kind of co-led the game rather than just me leading it or just her leading it. We kind of led it together, both at the front, responsible for one of the teams. So in this example, level 1 was about vocabulary. So it was the easiest level. The rules of the game were the PPT would show Chinese, then students should answer in English. If the PPT shows English, students should answer in Chinese. They would answer when their team lit up with lightning. And all of these different things were done on the PowerPoint. So one thing for myself personally, when I am designing games in order to help with classroom management and to make sure things go smoothly, is I include everything I could possibly need into the PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint ends up being very long, but then I end up just using that as kind of my main structure for that game. And then this level is worth 1 point. Students receive a point if they hear the correct answer from their team. They don't get a point if their team says the incorrect answer. And then the LET and ETA work together to award points on the board for everyone to see. And we would go through some practice rounds before the game started. So we would introduce level 1, how the points would be awarded, and then we'd practice it once or twice. And then the production part for level 1, we'd have 20 questions, 10 would go to each of the teams, and we would award points as so. Level 2 was about the sentence building. So using the PowerPoint to get a set of pictures in order, and they had to verbally produce a sentence that corresponds with those pictures. So if it was example cat, and then like under, and then the bed, they'd have to say the sentence, look at the 3 pictures and say the sentence, the cat is under the bed. This was worth 2 points, 1 for participation and 1 point for correctness. So this is something to think about whenever you're planning a lesson or planning an activity. How are points going to be awarded, and what do you want to award points for? And having that planned in advance is very crucial, especially if you and your LET are both awarding points, because you want to make sure that you're consistent. And then we did examples, then we produced it. Number 3 was introducing kind of like reading comprehension. So a short dialogue or passage would appear on the board, and then students, there'd be a multiple choice question for comprehension, multiple choice 1, 2, or 3. And then for this one, in order to make sure that everyone was participating and to kind of check everyone, we had this done silently, so absolutely no talking or they'd lose points, where they'd get a set period of time to look at the prompt, and then they would get the question, and then they all had to close their eyes and hold up their answer on their team as it being 1, 2, or 3. And then we'd count how many got it correct in order to see how many points would be awarded to the whole team. And So after we practice that, we'd produce that. And then the very last one is the sentence race, which is one of my favorite games to play in a junior high school setting or any setting, where each team would have a set of vocabulary flashcards, the same set, and every student's responsible for 1 or 2 words. Then the teacher would say a word, and if you're responsible for that word, you have to run to the front of the board and write a sentence using your word. And the student points would be awarded based on who's fastest, how accurate the sentence is, etc. So we did this until the end of class, and then we wrapped up, and the winning team received sticky notes. So this is just very quickly because we're out of time, and I'm actually going to move to break now, but I'm happy to talk about this more in detail if you have questions about these activities later, because some of these activities and games are really great for junior highs. If you are in junior high and want to talk about that later, we're more than welcome to come back to that. So I want to just go back. I'll bring us into break. Right now, we're going to go on a 10-minute break. So come back at 10:41. Again, just like last time, please don't leave the meeting. Just turn off your camera and your microphone because we're putting you guys into groups for the activity afterwards. Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone. You can go on break now. Okay, it's 10:41, so we're gonna come back and start the second part of our workshop. So if everyone is back, and you can turn on your cameras, and we'll get right in and get started. So just to give you an idea of what we're doing, we're going to be doing an activity based on what we just talked about. So we're actually going to try and make some lesson plans. So we've put together this shared Google Doc, and here I'll start sharing this tab instead, and I will send you guys the link for it, so you should be able to edit and access it right here. Da-da-da. Okay, so you should, this should be open for you to be able to edit. If you have any problems, let me know. So what you're gonna be doing is you're gonna be working in 9 small groups. So you'll be put into random breakout groups in a moment, and there'll be about 4 people in each group. And based on your breakout room number, if you're put in breakout room 1, then you're going to be group 1. If you're put in breakout room 2, then you're in group 2. So each group has a little lesson plan. You'll notice it's the same template I showed you earlier. The only different thing is that we didn't include a warm-up or a wrap-up. You can just focus on the PPP, the presenting the information, practicing it, and then producing it. Just because of the time, we don't want to get too involved. And then when you're writing things like teacher, assume that it's just 1 ETA and 1 LET, not all 4 of you and 4 teachers. So just assume 1 ETA and 1 LET. And yeah, you'll be able to look down and find your group in a moment when we break off into groups, and Sia's going to explain a little bit more about the material that you'll be working with. You'll notice that groups 1 to 3 have the same topic, groups 4 to 6 have the same topic, and groups 7 to 9 have the same topic from the textbook that Sia is going to introduce. And yeah, so you'll be working and doing all your work on this once you're put into those breakout rooms. And let me share this tab instead, and then I'll hand it over to Sia and she'll explain the breakout rooms and the materials you'll be using for this.
Okay, thank you, Deja. So before okay, let me do this first. All right, let me show the slides, so later I can show you the website. Okay, so now, okay, so later we're going to separate, divide you guys into, sorry, let me present this so you guys can see it better. Okay, apology for the Wi-Fi issue. It's really slow. All right, so we're going to divide you guys into 9 groups, and 3 groups will take over grammar, and 3 groups will take over reading comprehension, and another one will be the vocabulary and set phrases. So just a quick look of what you will be seeing, but don't worry if you can't see it clearly, because later I'm going to take you to the website to navigate it. So this is the learning objective, first part. This is something I just give you a guideline. You will need to write your own learning objectives. And it's on page 1 and 2. When you go to a website later, you will see how to find them. So they have a lot of vocabulary here and set phrases here. And this is the group that working with vocabulary. The next one is the grammar. So again, you will know that's only page 5. So when you go on the website, you will be able to see this. Now, this is the last one, reading comprehension. So this is page 15 and 16. So when you are in this reading comprehension group, just remember the page number. So now, David or Deja, if you can, please help me share the link in the chat box. So this is. Okay. this is the website that you will be seeing when you click into it, and this is I think it's the free version, so everybody should be able to access it. So when you get on the website, of course, like you can, I know most of the stuff are in Mandarin, so for some of you may be a challenge to do that, but you can still play around. And in the future, depends on which publisher that your school is working with. So you may work with this one. It's called, I think this one is Kangxuan. So this is just an online platform, online ebook that they are sharing with the general public. So like here is the table of contents, and they're only sharing the resources in lesson 1 and 2 and some other supplemental materials. So we are only focusing on lesson 1. So if you lost where you are, then just go to lesson 1. So page 1 and 2 is right here. You can of course click onto this and go to the page number that you want. And so you will be able to, so like this one, you will be able to see it in a bigger font, and then you will be able to know what's the content to plan your lesson. Now, like we talked about earlier, you will notice like this is just lesson 1, but they have a whole lot of, oh, wait a minute, you can't see the website. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Let me try. Share different tab. Okay, let me try it again because some people cannot see it. Okay, David or Deja, can you tell me if you're able to see it in the meeting?
Not yet.
Yes? Maybe stop sharing your screen. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen. Oh my God. Okay. So, hello here. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. Do we share the website yet? I think I unshare, but I think it's the Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi is messing up everything. Okay, so I think Deja already shared the website. So just play around. In the bottom, you will see the page number. And on the right-hand side, the first one with only 2 Mandarin characters, that is the table of content. So just play around that later, and then maybe now you are interested in learning more or looking at more, and you will find that just one lesson, there's a lot of things to plan for. And so take a look. Now we are going to send you to in your small groups. So if your group has some trouble or you need some guidance, you need some help, thank you, Deja. Now you're showing. Thanks. So it's like that. And can you show them the one on the right-hand side where to see the table of content? On the right-hand side, just right next to the page number. Yeah, so you can also do that too. Yeah, that's the table of content, so you can take a look. So just play around when you have time, and hopefully, yeah. Now, if you have some trouble or you need some help, just have one person to leave your room and come back to the main room, and then there will be one of us be there to help you, and then we will go in and we will assign you and put you in the same room. So when you leave the room, don't forget your group, okay? So
Yeah, and you'll have 20 minutes to work on it using the shared document. And if you guys finish early, we'd love if you can check out some of the other groups and what they're doing as well. So you can work on your group first. And then once you guys have something, you can go ahead and maybe look at and give a comment on the group below you. So if you're in group 1, then maybe after you're done with yours, you can look and comment on group 2. Group 2, once you're done with yours, you can look and comment on group 3. And any questions that you have, you can also type it in a comment, and the 3 of us advisors will be going around and giving comments during the 20 minutes.
and during
So
the 20
Sonia?
minutes when you are making comments, make sure leave some positive comments for your counterpart. It's not a competition, so let's take it easy on each other, okay? All right, so let's play around. See you in a bit.
Okay, ready? Go.
Hi, Sonia.
Thank you for helping us.
Wait, have
I
you not
think
been
Min-
put in a group yet?
Yeah, Min is still in this group, and
She will send to group 1.
so when I was looking at the website, you guys cannot see what I'm seeing at all.
We could only see the Google Docs not the Google Docs, the slides. So what happens is when you click share screen, and you share just one tab, every time you go to a different tab in your computer, you need to click over and say share this tab instead, or else
I
it will
think that
stay
is
on the other tab that you
Yeah,
were
that
originally
is the
sharing.
that's the new feature that I'm not used to yet. I just learned it from David yesterday, so I was playing around this afternoon, and I still couldn't figure it out. The one that you're seeing, I was able to see it first time when I was playing around, and then when I just did it, I couldn't. So I was just like, oh, you know what? I'm not talking to a screen myself, pretend everybody is listening.
No worries. I think the textbook is pretty self-explanatory to navigate.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the shared doc, and people are starting to write. So that's good.
Okay.
Cool.
So I'm gonna jump into that and take a look.
I wouldn't join a group too quickly if we want to give them
Yeah.
a second to look around first.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Maybe in like
Um,
5 or 10 minutes once they've had a chance to talk and explore.
I would say
A
at
little
least 5 minutes. But again, who knows how much we're going to get out of this activity? Because even if we were well on time, it's still a
Mhm.
very cramped activity, right?
Mhm.
So they're not going to have enough time to really necessarily flesh out anything really good. But the
Mhm.
idea is to get them to start thinking about, here's my textbook pages. What might I do with this? And I think for us, this will be learning to see what are they already capable of independently, and this will help us guide, what we need to help them with in the future.
Have you guys had a chance to check out all of the introductions that have been popping up on the Google Classroom?
I've
saw a few.
seen what I've been getting in my emails.
Yeah.
It
Quite a
seems
bit
like
of
quite a few
them-
of them have like
Yeah,
pretty
they're
solid
responding
teaching
to-
experience.
Yeah.
It looks like they're starting with the SWABATs,
Mhm.
which is a good place to start.
That is a good place to start.
And so we have 9 groups, yeah?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Sonia said there's roughly 3 to 4 people per group.
Did you see everybody leaving when we're like, we're going to do a group activity, and all of a sudden, like the bottom notifications, this person left, this person left the meeting, this person left the meeting.
Is it like is it like that? Like it's a norm like that, David, in the past?
Well, no.
Sorry, group 4 need help. So who want to go?
Good for
Yeah.
okay. I can go. It's fine. Put me in there.
Okay. Let me see.
Sonia, how do you know Group 4 needs help?
Yeah.
I just know.
You just know.
I'm the god. No.
Hello.
Hello, we send Sia to your group. Are you group 4?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Let me go back.
Yeah.
Go back.
Sonia, can you send it back?
Let me see. Okay, let me try again.
Oh, sorry.
Mobeen is in the Penghu group.
Okay.
Yes, he is one of the 3.
But they have a bunch of ETFs.
They have 8 ETFs. 3 ETFs.
So that's almost 3 times the number of ETFs as ETAs, which makes sense because they have a better idea of what they're getting into.
Yeah, that's true.
So, okay, so let's talk about this real quick. We have 20 minutes until we're finished. And they just started working. So, maybe we can only expect them to maybe get some swabats and kind of fill out the top part, objectives, teaching materials, and vocabulary is what I'm seeing people fill out. I don't know if people will actually have any time to. So another option is to just spend almost all of this time working on this and then be like, we're gonna wrap it up next week if we want to use any of that time. We could have them complete it. They could complete it between now and Tuesday, and then we do some kind of wrap it up on Tuesday.
Another idea, I mean, we can always give it another 5-10 minutes and see where they're at, because there's a chance that they might, like, once they get in the flow of things, understand the textbook, they might just like be able to just like not belt something out, like just quickly get something down. The other option is that because we have 9 groups and there's 3 of us, we could each take 3 groups to give more detailed feedback and comments on, and then we could each choose 1 group of the 3 to share in the warm-up for next week's first session.
Sure. I just wonder how much we can accomplish in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know about giving them a homework assignment necessarily, but like I think something like that could make sense. If it's like, finish this between now and Tuesday, work with your group or whatever, and just to kind of flesh out some ideas. And then we're going to have we're going to choose 1 group per section to give a brief sharing at the beginning of Tuesday's session. What would they share? Just share their activity?
Yeah.
But 3 groups sharing, assuming they take 5 minutes each, is going to be 15 minutes. So that would be a pretty big chunk of our...
Well, that would be our entire warm-up. Hypothetically. Okay. That would be like, because we take roughly 15 minutes for the warm-up yesterday's workshop.
Tuesday is classroom management?
Yep.
And since we're going to have another classroom management workshop, maybe it would be okay to take some of that time since we have an option to do it, to continue that next time.
I agree. So do we want to give them, when these 20 minutes are up, call them back to the main group and tell them the updated plan, then send them back to their small groups for maybe like 3 minutes, just so that they can plan within their groups about when they want to meet and how they want to finish. because we're going to
Yeah,
need to give them a little bit
exchange
more time.
contact information maybe,
Yeah,
or find a
they
way that
might
they
not
can
have it.
communicate with each other.
Hmm.
See, what we're just talking about is, since we only have 20 minutes left, we're thinking of having them between now and Tuesday's workshop finish their lesson plans as in their groups, and then use our warm up on Tuesday to have 3 of the 9 groups, which I think we would choose, maybe based on
Hmm.
who completes it, right? Like you want to
Hmm.
choose a group that's done, maybe let them know on Monday or something,
Hmm.
or Sunday night, and have 3 groups share their lesson plan and kind of explain their thinking as our warm up on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think that's good. If I will say if some of them, I'm not sure if all of them will do that, but some of them incorporate like some sort of um like like the one that Deja was sharing of hers, like adding some like classroom points and that kind of stuff in their lesson plan. That's definitely the one that we can choose because they're connected to what we are talking about Tuesday.
Group 7 is knocking it out for sure. So basically, we would just look
Yeah.
at we might say have it finished by Sunday night. We choose our favorite groups on Monday, and then on Tuesday have those groups share their lesson plan and give a brief overview, assuming we know how to contact the people. So we would also want to have them put their names under teacher.
Oh, yes. So put your group names under teacher. We are thinking, yeah.
I think we have their emails. I can't remember who sent it out. I think it's Kevin or
Well, they're
Ariel.
in Google Classroom also.
yeah, right.
And I don't know if they can communicate through there, but take note of who's in your group. Find a way to
So we can
contact
remind
them.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have the link for the book, so they are able to go back and refer back to that. And so I
So
think that's
maybe, Sonia, if we pull everybody out, we can put them right back in the exact same group, right?
You
If we
mean
bring
right now?
everybody into the main room, you can put them back into their same breakout groups, right? That's no problem.
I think I can close the breakout room and then they will come back to the main room. But I don't know if the records of breakout room will still the same or I have to set up again. So it depends.
Well then, okay, well then what?
Can you take a screenshot or something if it shows you who's in what group right now? In case they failed to keep track of that. Ideally, we could bring them back into the main room, tell them what's going on, put them back into their same breakout rooms so they could plan for how to finish this.
Well, if you notice on the worksheet, for like the most important things, I can just write that on each group's thing. Put your names here and exchange contact information. So that in the very least, if we aren't able to send them the same groups, hopefully they'll see this.
How did you do that so fast?
I just copy and paste into each one.
She has 8 hands. She has 8 arms. She can do everything.
Octopus.
And just hopefully they see that because I put it in blue with yellow highlight.
Okay.
So do you want me to close the breakout room?
Not yet.
We still have 8 minutes left. So
we go until 11:20, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Technically,
so
yes.
Maybe,
the break.
So maybe we close the breakout rooms at 11:10, and then we can have a wrap up, talk about next week, talk about their task, and then end.
Just in case they can't get back into their breakout room groups after we come back to the main group. I think a lot of them have seen it. They're putting their names in.
And as long as they have their names, they can find their contact information through Google Classroom.
Yeah.
Classroom, yes. So we'll just wait for their regular breakout room sessions be done and then update them about the plan.
Great.
Cool.
I'm happy to see people actually working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, Sia, no, it's not a common thing for people to leave because it's usually required. But because these sessions are
Yes.
optional, people can choose not to do the interactive stuff and just come for the informative stuff. It kind of might speak to their confidence levels that they don't want to, work with other people and maybe feel incompetent. But I didn't really pay attention to who left.
Yeah.
Well, I saw that one person left, but then jumped right back in. Like, I think they just like.
I think it was. I noticed
Mhm.
maybe 3 or 4, and maybe one of those came back.
I only saw
I
two,
don't
but
know.
one is the coordinator, I think. So
I'm not too concerned with it.
yeah.
Me neither.
And I'm seeing
So,
most groups have added their names, and so except for group 4.
Mhm.
But if only
think
one group
that-
hasn't done it, then whoever's left is in that group.
Yeah.
And hopefully they should like realize if you're talking to 3 people for 20 minutes, you should take note of their names. Hopefully. But it's more for us to know who's in each group. So David, just as a quick question, they asked for those lesson plans, the 3 that you shared. How did you want to share that with them? Just post them on Google Classroom?
Yeah. That'd be a more permanent share than putting
In
it
the chat box.
in the chat box, which will disappear. So I can I can do that right now.
Okay.
I'll put the ebooks link in
And I
the
set them as
Google-
view only, and I removed the names except for Deja since I got specific permission from you.
Oh,
Yes.
just to remind you for the second one, I can actually see you block out Alex, but I can still see Alex. So maybe you want to remove the name entirely.
Well, then I'm just going to delete it then. I'll just
Yeah.
delete it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's stupid. Then what's the point of blocking it? I still see through it.
How did
Oh
you
my
know
gosh,
that? I
group
was trying to figure out
7
how
is
you
like,
do it, I couldn't do it, actually.
wow.
Yeah, group 7 was, and they were all writing their own parts and stuff. So good stuff.
Like really good stuff. Exit tickets, everything. Wow. Yeah, right now it looks like it's only group 4 that hasn't seen that name part yet. But when they come back, we can just remind them to.
How many people in group 4, Sonia? I only see 2 for some reason.
I think one ETA was offline, so used to be 3. Ray is the coordinator.
Yeah, I see Ray in there.
So actually, they only 2 right now.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know who they are actually, but I feel like they are quite timid, and I don't think they probably don't have any teaching experience, so that explains why it's talking a little.
Can we change the name of the Google Classroom? Oh, it says ETA North. Never mind. And the other says ETF North. Perfect.
Yep.
So just
Although I do
share
want
these
to
as an
change that
announcement.
picture. Yes, just share as an announcement.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Okay.
Deja, can I ask your help? I'm having
Yeah.
such a hard time with my Wi-Fi right now. I want to share the website of the ebook
Mhm.
on Google Classroom, but I can't because my screen keeps freezing. Can you help me with that?
No problem. Or David, did you want to include it in your post, or did you already make a post?
I can do it.
Just in
Thank
one
you, guys.
post, like materials from today. If you also want to include the link to the packing one as well. I mean, I know they have the Frida also shared that they do have a things you might want to pack one too on the Fulbright website, but this one is just more like from what we talked about in our group.
So later, if ETAs they don't come to the main room, I need to go to the breakout room, and tell them to come back.
Oh,
Right.
I thought it would just close everybody.
Here, David, also.
Where's the packing list?
Here,
There
I'm
it is.
sending it all of them to you now. Oh, you got
I
it?
got it.
Also, I think we can include the worksheet one too, worksheet for activity, because they might not save that link, and the link was in here. Just where was that? Oh my gosh. Sonia, I'm sending you a photo.
Where?
Online.
Okay.
Kelsey just told me that Elowen says good morning.
Where's Elowen?
Elowen is the baby.
Cute.
Very cute.
So 3 lesson plans, the textbook, the lesson planning worksheet, and the packing suggestions list.
Cool. And it looks like everyone's back. I think.
Okay, still have one group. Let me
Okay.
call them.
Well, while you guys were working, we were looking at the document that you guys were editing, and you guys definitely did a really good job. A lot of you all had different things that you decided to do, and it looks like a lot of the lesson plans are really complete. Also, thank you guys for noticing my little last minute addition of putting your names on it, and also exchanging contact information within your group, because we're actually going to extend this activity into next week. We're going to do sharing of these next week because of time. So hopefully when you were in your small group, you kind of got each other's names and contact information in case you want to keep working on it after the workshop. Oh, wait, is everyone here now, Sonia? Yes?
Also, I just
Okay.
posted all of the lesson plan examples, the textbook website, the lesson planning worksheet, and the packing suggestions list into the Google Classroom as an announcement. So you can check all those links there if you so need.
Yeah. Okay, but I guess then David or Sia, do you guys want to wrap up, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can take it. So to make sure that and we're looking through the examples and are very happy with how quickly you were able to get as much accomplished in the short amount of time as you were. But given the short amount of time that we had, we wanted to give you some extra time to kind of flesh things out if you would like to. So as far as this activity, completing a lesson plan based on your assigned page numbers, if you could try and finish your lesson plan by Sunday night, our time, I guess. We'll take a look through them. We'll take a look through all of them on our Monday, and reach out to a few of you representing each section. And then we would like to, since we don't really have too much time to wrap up the work that you did with this activity, we'll use that as our warm up on Tuesday. So taking a look through the lesson plans, giving some overall feedback to all of you, and then having a couple groups share maybe some of your motivations or what you were thinking when you planned this out. So that's why we had you write down your contact or your names so that you know who is in your group. You should have contact information in the Google Classroom. But if you're not done, keep working with your group to finish your lesson plans by Sunday night of this week. We'll take a look through them all on Monday, reach out to a few of you that we think would be good to share to the whole group. And then for our warm up on Tuesday, we'll talk about this lesson planning, what we saw, and have a couple of you share. Make sure to reach out to us if you have any questions about any of those things in the meantime. But we have our next workshop scheduled for next Tuesday. The topic will be classroom management. So hopefully that will be a fun and useful one for you. And I don't know, do we have any other announcements before we end?
No, but just to say thank you to everyone who's put your introduction on the Google Classroom. We've had a lot of fun looking through them and kind of getting to know you guys because we're not in person. So it's nice to be able to learn a little bit more about you besides just seeing your name and picture in these virtual workshops. So if you haven't done that yet, feel free to add it to the comments and we'll just keep reading through them. So thank you guys for that. And also if you have, if you're very busy this weekend, because we didn't really tell you a lot in advance about this kind of activity, don't feel any time pressure that if you can't meet with everyone in your group. This is just if you'd like to flesh it out further and have more to talk about and share on Tuesday. So don't feel
so don't put a lot of pressure on yourself.
By it. Yeah.
Just an extra thing, if you wanted a little bit more time to work on that, we'll spend time Tuesday looking at that so you have time between now and Sunday night. So we have Monday to look through them to get that done. If you feel like it's good now, then that's fine. And thank you all for being here. We're about out of time, so enjoy your weekend, and we will see you next Tuesday.